They handed my sister the keys to a brand new white Lexus and told everyone it was a family investment. Then my father raised his glass, smiled, and said, "We used Emily's inheritance for it. She doesn't need it anyway." 30 people laughed. I stood there in my dress uniform, smiling like I hadn't just been erased from my own life. But what they didn't know was that my grandmother was still alive, listening, and 3 days later she made one call that would change everything. If this story speaks to your heart, take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if it truly resonates with you. And leave a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there right now. I always read them, and it reminds me I'm not alone in this. My name is Emily Carter. I'm 32 years old, a senior officer in the United States Army. And what happened that night at my parents' anniversary party was the moment everything in my family finally broke. But to understand how they were able to take something that was legally mine and turn it into a gift for my sister, you have to go back to where this all really started. The Carter house sits on half an acre just outside Arlington, Virginia. White columns, perfectly trimmed hedges, the kind of place that looks like success from the outside, the kind of place where nothing is supposed to be wrong. Growing up, there were 2 daughters in that house, but only one who mattered. Olivia was 3 years younger than me, bright, charming, the kind of person who could walk into a room and immediately become the center of it. My parents loved that about her. They fed it, encouraged it, built their entire world around it. I was different. I followed rules. I kept my head down. I worked. I remember the day I left. 2 duffel bags, 45 pounds each. My mother hugged me like it was a formality, like she was checking something off a list. My father shook my hand. Olivia cried, not because I was leaving, but because she said the house would feel empty without someone to do the chores. I laughed when she said it. I thought she was joking. She wasn't. Over the years, I built something for myself. Promotions, deployments, leadership. The kind of career my parents could brag about at dinner parties, but never quite understood. It's impressive, my father would say, but it's not exactly practical long-term. Practical. That word followed me everywhere in that house. Olivia, on the other hand, was always described as full of potential. Potential meant expensive gifts. Potential meant opportunities. Potential meant forgiveness every time she failed to follow through on anything. And she did, over and over again. Dropped out of one program, switched majors twice. Started a business that lasted 6 months. My parents funded all of it, every time, no questions asked. I didn't ask for anything, not once. I paid for my own life, my own car, my own apartment, my own future. That's what made what happened next feel unreal. 3 months before that party, I got a letter. Certified mail, thick envelope, my grandmother's name on the return address, Eleanor Carter. The only person in that family who ever looked at me and didn't see a disappointment waiting to happen. She had been sick, hospice care, the kind of quiet, final stage no one talks about directly. I hadn't been able to visit as often as I wanted. Duty doesn't pause for grief. Inside that envelope was a document, a trust, my name on it, not Olivia's, not my parents', mine. I read it 3 times before it made sense. My grandmother had set aside a significant portion of her estate for me, not because I needed it, but because, in her words, you are the only one who understands the value of something you didn't inherit. I didn't tell anyone right away. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted something that was just mine for once. Maybe I didn't trust what would happen if they knew. I kept the document in a locked drawer in my apartment. I went back to work. I told myself I'd deal with it later, but I didn't have to tell them. Somehow, they already knew. The first sign was small. A question from my mother during a phone call. Casual. Too casual. Did your grandmother ever mention anything financial to you? I said no. She paused, just for a second. Then she laughed it off. Oh, I'm sure it's nothing. That was the moment I should have understood something was wrong. But I didn't. Not yet. 2 weeks later, my father invited me to their anniversary party. 40 years of marriage. Big event. Catered, extended family. Friends. Business contacts. The kind of night where everything is polished and perfect on the surface. I almost didn't go. I had just gotten back from a 4-hour duty day. I was exhausted, but something in his voice felt off. "It would mean a lot if you were there," he said. He never says things like that, so I went. I wore my dress uniform, not to impress anyone, just because it was the only thing I didn't have to think about. When I walked in, the house was full. Laughter. Music. Glasses clinking. Olivia was already there, standing in the center of the room like she owned it, and parked in the driveway was a car I had never seen before. White, brand new, still had the dealer tags on it. I remember thinking it didn't make sense. Not yet. But something about it stayed with me. And I didn't know it then, but that car was about to become the center of everything. I remember standing in that doorway for a second too long, staring at that car like it was trying to tell me something I did not want to hear. It was a white Lexus RX, still shining under the porch lights, not a single scratch on it, the kind of car that easily runs over $50,000, maybe more with the upgrades. My parents were not the type to make impulsive purchases like that. Every dollar in that house had always been justified, measured, explained, especially when it came to me. So I stepped inside, closed the door behind me, and told myself there had to be a reasonable explanation. There always was, or at least that is what I had been trained to believe. The party was already in full swing. Music played softly through the speakers, something classic and neutral, the kind of playlist designed not to offend anyone. Caterers moved through the room with trays of appetizers. People laughed too loudly, the way they do when they are trying to impress each other. My mother spotted me first. Her eyes flicked over my uniform, quick and assessing, then she smiled, that same polished smile she used for guests. "Emily, you made it," she said, like I was a distant relative, not her daughter. She kissed the air near my cheek, careful not to smudge her makeup. My father followed, shaking my hand again like we were at a business function. "Good to see you," he said. "We were not sure you would come." I nodded. "You said it mattered." He gave a short laugh, already distracted, already scanning the room for someone more important to talk to. Olivia appeared a moment later, heels clicking against the hardwood floor, a glass of champagne in her hand. She looked happy. Not just normal happy. Elevated. Like something had already happened tonight and I had missed it. "There she is," she said, wrapping her arms around me in a quick hug that felt more like a performance than anything real. "You look so official," I smiled. "You look like you are celebrating something." She grinned, but did not answer. That was the first moment the feeling hit me. Something was off, not wrong yet, just misaligned. Like walking into a conversation halfway through. I moved through the room greeting people, answering the same questions over and over again. "How is the army? Where are you stationed now? Do you ever think about settling down?" I gave the same polite answers I always gave. "Yes, it is good. We will see." I had learned how to exist in that space without expecting anything from it. But every few minutes, my eyes drifted back toward the driveway, toward that car. And every time I looked, I noticed something new. The way people glanced at it through the windows. The way Olivia's friends kept whispering to her, then looking outside, then back at her with excitement. It was not just a car. It was the center of the night. And somehow, I still did not know why. About 30 minutes in, my father tapped his glass with a fork. The room quieted almost instantly. He had always been good at commanding attention. "If I could have everyone gather for a moment," he said, his voice carrying easily across the room. Conversations faded. People turned. I felt my shoulders tighten without knowing why. My mother stepped beside him, smiling, one hand resting lightly on his arm. Olivia moved closer, too, positioning herself just slightly in front of them, like she belonged there, like she was part of whatever was coming next. "Thank you all for being here tonight," my father began. 40 years of marriage is no small thing, and we are grateful to celebrate it with people who matter to us." There were nods, soft applause. He continued, speaking about family, about legacy, about building something that lasts. Words he had used my entire life, words that always sounded good, even when they did not match reality. Then his tone shifted, just slightly. "And speaking of family," he said, turning toward Olivia, "we wanted to do something special tonight." My stomach dropped. I did not know why, not yet, but something inside me recognized the moment before my mind did. My mother reached for Olivia's hand, squeezing it gently. "You have worked so hard," she said. You deserve to be supported. Supported. The word echoed in my head because I knew what it meant in this house. It meant money. It meant resources. It meant choices. Things that had always flowed in one direction. My father gestured toward the front of the house. "Why do you not show everyone?" he said. Olivia laughed. A soft, delighted sound. And for a second, she looked almost surprised, like she was playing along with something she had not fully expected. But then she turned, walked toward the door, and everyone followed. I moved with them, slower, my steps measured, my chest tight in a way I could not explain. The night air hit as soon as the door opened, cool, quiet, the kind of stillness that makes everything feel sharper. The car sat there under the porch light, gleaming, perfect, untouched. Olivia stopped in front of it, turned back to the crowd, and raised her glass slightly. "This is insane," she said, laughing. "I still cannot believe it." People clapped. Someone whistled. My father stepped forward again, pride written all over his face. "Go on," he said. "Tell them." And that was the moment everything began to fall into place. Not clearly, not completely, but enough that I felt it. That slow, sinking realization that whatever explanation I had been holding on to was about to disappear. Olivia looked at the car, then back at everyone, her smile wide, effortless. "My parents surprised me tonight," she said. "They said it was time I had something reliable, something that matches where I am in life. Laughter, approval, nods," my mother added. "She has so much potential. We wanted to invest in that." Invest, there it was again, the word that always seemed to justify everything. I stood there, silent, watching it unfold like I was outside my own body. Because even then, even in that moment, I still had not connected it to me. Not fully, not yet, but I was getting close. And I did not know it then, but the next sentence my father said would make it impossible to ignore. My father smiled, like he had just delivered the perfect punchline, and then he said it. "We decided to put your sister first this time," he said, his voice calm, almost casual. "So we used part of the inheritance to make this happen." At first, I did not react, not because I understood, but because I did not. The word inheritance hung in the air like it belonged to someone else's story. Conversations around me paused, just for a second, then resumed in soft murmurs. A few people laughed politely. Someone said, "Well, that makes sense." And I stood there, staring at him, waiting for the rest of the sentence, waiting for the part where he explained what he actually meant. He did not. He just lifted his glass again, like the matter was settled, like he had just explained everything anyone needed to know. My mother nodded beside him, her expression composed, almost proud. Olivia looked at me for a split second, not long, just enough for me to see it. Not guilt, not even discomfort, just a flicker of something cautious, like she was checking how much I understood. And that was the moment it clicked, not all at once, not like a dramatic realization. It was quieter than that, slower, like pieces sliding into place, whether I wanted them to or not. The letter, the trust, the question my mother asked me weeks ago, the sudden invitation to this party, the car sitting in the driveway like a centerpiece. It was never a surprise for Olivia. It was a decision, and I was not part of it. I felt my hands go still at my sides. I did not drop anything. I did not speak. I just stood there, in full uniform in front of people who were now pretending not to look at me. Because they knew, maybe not everything, but enough to understand that something about this was not right. My father kept talking, shifting the conversation forward like nothing had happened. "Family is about making smart choices," he said. "It is about investing where it matters." Investing. There it was again, always framed as logic, always wrapped in reason, never acknowledged for what it really was. I swallowed, slowly, trying to ground myself, trying to make sure I did not react in a way that would give them exactly what they expected. Because I could feel it now. The setup, the roles, Olivia, the recipient, my parents, the providers, and me, the one who was supposed to understand. The one who was supposed to stay quiet. Someone behind me said, "It is just money, right?" Another voice replied, "She is doing fine anyway. Military, good benefits." I did not turn around. I did not need to. I had heard versions of that my entire life. The idea that because I survived on my own, I did not deserve anything more, that independence somehow erased entitlement, that needing less meant deserving less. Olivia opened the driver's side door, laughing as she slid into the seat. People gathered closer, admiring the interior, commenting on the features, the leather, the technology. My mother moved toward her, explaining details, pointing things out, like this had been planned for weeks. Because it had. And all of it, every detail, had been built on something that was supposed to belong to me. I took a step back, then another. No one stopped me. No one asked if I was okay. That was the part that stayed with me the most. Not what they did, but how easy it was for them to move on from it, like I was already gone. Like my reaction did not matter because it had already been decided for me. I turned and walked back into the house. The music was still playing. The food was still laid out, glasses half full on every surface. It looked exactly the same as it had 20 minutes ago. Nothing had changed, except everything had. I walked into the kitchen, the one place in that house that had always been quiet, even during events. I placed my hands on the counter and stared at the marble surface, focusing on the small details, the veins in the stone, the reflection of the overhead lights. I counted my breaths. 1, 2, 3. I did not cry. I did not raise my voice. I did not reach for my phone. I just stood there. Because reacting would mean acknowledging that what just happened was real. And I was not ready to do that. Not yet. Footsteps entered behind me. I did not turn right away. I already knew who it was. "Emily," Olivia said softly. I turned then. She leaned against the doorway, still holding her glass, her expression careful. "You did not say anything," she added. I looked at her, really looked at her, trying to find something in her face that would make this make sense. "What exactly would you like me to say?" I asked. My voice came out steady. Too steady. She hesitated. "Just for a second." "I mean, it is not like you needed it," she said. There it was, simple, clean, final. I nodded slowly. "Right," I said. "Of course." She relaxed slightly, like that was the response she had been hoping for, like I had just confirmed her version of the story. "It is just timing," she continued. "Mom and Dad thought this would help me get on my feet." I almost smiled, not because it was funny, but because it was so predictable, the same justification, the same logic, repeated in a different voice. "And the inheritance?" I asked. She shifted her weight, looked away for a moment, then back at me. "It is all family money anyway," she said. "It is not like it was just yours." That sentence landed harder than anything my father had said outside, because it was not loud, it was not public, it was quiet, casual, like a fact, like something that had always been true. And in that moment, I realized something I had never fully accepted before. This was never about a car. It was never about money. It was about control, about who was allowed to have something, and who was expected to give it up. I nodded again. "Got it," I said. And I meant it. Not in the way she thought, but in a way that settled something inside me. Because for the first time, I was not confused. I was not trying to understand them. I saw it clearly, and I did not know it yet. But that clarity was the beginning of everything that came next. I walked out of that kitchen before she could say anything else, not because I was overwhelmed, not because I needed space, but because I already knew there was nothing left to hear. The conversation was finished the moment she said it was family money. That sentence kept replaying in my head as I moved through the house, past people who were laughing again, past voices that lowered just slightly when I passed, past eyes that avoided mine just enough to make it obvious they knew something had happened. I did not stop. I did not explain. I grabbed my coat from the chair near the front door, the same chair I had used every holiday since I was a teenager, and for a second, I just stood there holding it, looking at the room one more time. Everything looked the same decorations, the same faces, the same carefully constructed version of a perfect family. And yet, I felt like I was looking at it from the outside for the first time, like I had finally stepped out of something I had been inside my entire life. I opened the door and stepped out into the cold night air. The sound of the party dulled behind me as the door closed, replaced by silence. Real silence. The kind that lets your thoughts catch up to you whether you want them to or not. The Lexus was still there, sitting under the light, untouched, waiting. I walked past it without slowing down. I did not look at it again, because now I knew exactly what it was. Not a gift, not an investment, a decision, a statement, a line drawn that I had not realized existed until I had already been placed on the wrong side of it. I got into my car, closed the door, and sat there for a moment, with my hands on the steering wheel. The dashboard clock read 9:42 p.m. I stared at it, letting the numbers anchor me. I had learned that in training. Focus on something simple, something real. When everything else feels like it is shifting, I took a slow breath, then another. I did not cry. Not because it did not hurt, but because it was not that kind of moment. This was not sudden pain. This was clarity, cold, sharp, final. I started the engine and pulled out of the driveway, the tires crunching softly against the gravel. No one came outside. No one called my name. No one stopped me. I drove for about 10 minutes before my phone lit up on the passenger seat. Olivia? I let it ring. It stopped. Then started again. I let it ring a second time. Then it stopped for good. A minute later, a message came through. You left without saying goodbye. I glanced at it, then set the phone face down. There was nothing I could say that would make her understand. And more importantly, I was not sure I wanted her to. By the time I reached my apartment, it was close to 10:15. The building was quiet. Most of the lights in the windows were already off. I parked, turned off the engine, and sat there for a second longer than necessary. Because I knew what was waiting for me upstairs. The drawer. The document. The thing I had not wanted to look at again because it made everything too real. I walked inside, took the stairs instead of the elevator, more out of habit than anything else, and unlocked my door. The apartment smelled the same. Clean, still, controlled. Exactly how I had left it that morning. I set my keys down on the counter, took off my jacket, and walked straight to the bedroom. No hesitation, no delay. I opened the drawer. The envelope was still there, thick, unopened since the last time I had read it. I picked it up, sat on the edge of the bed, and opened it again. Slower this time, more carefully. Like I was looking for something I had missed before. The trust document was exactly as I remembered. My name printed clearly. The terms outlined in precise legal language. The allocation of assets, the conditions, the signatures. My grandmother's signature at the bottom, steady despite her age. I read every line, then I read it again, and this time, I noticed what I had not fully processed before, the control clause. The part that specified who had authority over the funds until they were formally transferred. It was not my parents, it was not Olivia, it was not even me. Not directly, it was the executor, appointed by my grandmother, a third party, independent, bound by the terms of the trust. My grip on the paper tightened slightly, because that meant something very simple, something very clear. My parents were never supposed to have access to that money. Not legally, not under any interpretation of what was written in front of me. I sat there, staring at the document, feeling something shift again inside me. Not confusion, not anger, something else, something steadier. Because for the first time since that night began, I was not reacting. I was thinking. I reached for my phone, flipped it over, and opened my messages. There were 3 missed calls now, 2 from Olivia, 1 from my mother. A new message had come in, from my father. We need to talk about your behavior tonight. I read it once, then again. Then I set the phone down. Behavior. That word almost made me laugh, not because it was funny, but because it told me everything I needed to know. They still thought this was about me, about how I reacted, about whether I would accept what they had already decided. They did not know what I was holding in my hands. They did not know what my grandmother had put in place. They did not know that the thing they had just used was never theirs to use in the first place. I looked down at the signature at the bottom of the page again. Eleanor Carter. The only person in that family who had ever seen me clearly. The only one who had ever planned ahead. And for the first time that night, I felt something close to certainty. Not about what would happen, but about one thing. This was not over, not even close, and somewhere, in a quiet room, in a hospice bed, My grandmother was still alive. And I had a feeling. She already knew exactly what they had done. I did not sleep that night, not even for a minute. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the document still on the nightstand beside me, like it was breathing, like it was alive in a way. Everything else in my life suddenly was not. Every few minutes, my phone lit up again. Messages, missed calls, my mother, my father, Olivia, even my aunt. The same pattern over and over again. Concern that did not feel like concern. Questions that were not really questions. Are you okay? You left abruptly. We need to clear this up. I did not respond, because I already knew what they wanted. They wanted control back. They wanted the narrative to stay intact. They wanted me to step back into the role I had always played. The quiet one. The reasonable one. The one who made things easier for everyone else. Around 3 a.m, I got up, walked into the kitchen, and poured myself a glass of water. My hands were steady. That was the part that surprised me. I was not shaking. I was not overwhelmed. I was focused, like something inside me had finally aligned. I picked up my phone again, scrolled through the messages, and stopped on my father's last one. We need to talk about your behavior tonight. I read it again. Then I set the phone down without replying. Because for the first time, I realized something simple. I did not need to explain myself to them anymore. They had already made their decision. Now it was my turn to decide what I was going to do with it. By 6 a.m, I was dressed and ready. Not in uniform this time. Just jeans, a sweater, something simple. I picked up the document, slid it carefully back into the envelope, and placed it in my bag. Then I grabbed my keys and walked out the door. The drive to the hospice facility took about 40 minutes. Early morning traffic was light, the roads still quiet, the sky just beginning to shift from dark to gray. I kept my eyes on the road, but my mind was somewhere else entirely. Running through everything I had read, every detail, every clause, every line that made it clear that what my parents had done was not just wrong, it was not allowed. The building came into view just after 7. It was smaller than I expected, clean, quiet. The kind of place designed to make people feel calm, even when nothing about the situation actually was. I parked, turned off the engine, and sat there for a second, my hands resting on the steering wheel. This was the part I had been avoiding, not the confrontation with my parents. That did not scare me anymore. This, walking into a room where time was running out for someone who had always been there, someone who had seen everything long before I did. I took a breath, opened the door, and stepped out. Inside, the air smelled faintly of antiseptic and something softer underneath it. Lavender, maybe. The front desk nurse greeted me with a gentle smile. "Can I help you?" she asked. "I am here to see Eleanor Carter," I said. She nodded, checked something on her computer, then looked back up. "She has been expecting you," she said. "Expecting me." That made my chest tighten just slightly. I followed the directions down a quiet hallway. Past closed doors, past soft voices, past moments that felt too private to belong to anyone else. When I reached her room, the door was slightly open. I paused for a second, my hand on the frame, then pushed it gently and stepped inside. She was awake, sitting up slightly in the bed, a blanket draped over her legs, her hands resting calmly in her lap. She looked smaller than I remembered, frailer, but her eyes were exactly the same, sharp, clear, present. She looked at me, and for a second, neither of us said anything. Then she smiled. Not a big smile, not dramatic, just knowing. "Emily," she said softly. I stepped closer. "Hi, Grandma." She studied my face for a moment, like she was reading something written there. Then she nodded slowly. "They did it, didn't they?" she asked. I did not ask what she meant. I did not pretend to misunderstand. I just nodded. "Yes," I said. She closed her eyes briefly, not in surprise, not in shock, but in confirmation, like something she had already anticipated had finally happened. "I gave them more credit than that," she murmured. I pulled a chair closer and sat down beside her. For a moment, I did not speak. I just watched her, the steady rise and fall of her breathing, the quiet strength that was still there, even now. The Suzhou. Then I reached into my bag, pulled out the envelope, and placed it gently on the bed beside her. "I read everything," I said. She opened her eyes again, looked down at the envelope, then back at me. Good, she said. Then you know. I nodded. They were never supposed to have access, I said. Not in any way. She gave a small, approving nod. And yet, she said. I exhaled slowly. And yet, they used it. She was quiet for a second. Then she reached out, her hand light but steady as it rested over mine. Emily, she said, her voice calm but firm, what they did is not just disrespectful. She paused, making sure I was listening. It is actionable. That word settled into the room like something heavy. Not loud, not dramatic, just definitive. I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time since the night before, I felt something shift again. Not confusion, not anger, something sharper, clearer, direction. What do I do? I asked. She held my gaze for a moment longer. Then she smiled, just slightly. The kind of smile that meant she had already thought 10 steps ahead. You do nothing, she said. I frowned slightly. Nothing? She nodded once. Not yet. Her grip on my hand tightened just a fraction, because I already made the call. I felt my breath catch, just for a second. What call? I asked quietly. Her eyes flicked toward the door, then back to me. And that was when she said it. Calm, certain, unshakable. I told them to send in my attorney. For a second, I thought I had misheard her. Not because the words were unclear, but because of how calm she sounded when she said them. Like this had already been set in motion long before I ever walked into that room. You already called? I asked, my voice lower now, more focused. She nodded once, slow and certain, like she was confirming something inevitable. Early this morning, she said, before you even got here. I felt something shift in my chest again. Not shock, not exactly. More like alignment. Like I had just stepped into a plan that had already been waiting for me. They will be here, she added quietly. Your parents. I frowned slightly. You told them to come? She gave me a look. Not sharp, not harsh. Just knowing. Of course I did, she said. They would not ignore a request from me. Not now. I understood what she meant. In that family, my grandmother was the last authority that still carried weight. The one person my father had never fully been able to override, even when he disagreed, even when he pretended otherwise. And the attorney? I asked. Her eyes softened just a fraction. He will come when it is time, she said. That was all she gave me. No name, no details, just certainty. I sat there for a moment, letting that settle, letting the pieces start to connect in a way they had not before. This was not reaction. This was preparation. My grandmother had not just anticipated what they might do. She had planned for it, built something that would hold even after she was gone. And now, that plan was moving. What do you want me to do? I asked again, even though she had already answered. She watched me carefully. I want you to stay exactly as you are, she said. Calm, quiet. Let them speak first. I nodded slowly. That part I understood. I had been doing that my entire life. The difference was, this time it was not weakness. It was strategy. We sat in silence after that. Not uncomfortable, not heavy, just still. I could hear the faint hum of the hallway outside, distant voices, the soft beeping of machines from other rooms. Time felt different in that space. Slower, more deliberate. About 20 minutes later, there was a knock at the door. Light, polite, but firm enough that it did not feel optional. My grandmother did not look at the door. She looked at me. That will be them, she said. My chest tightened just slightly. Not fear, not nerves, just awareness. This was the moment everything shifted from quiet understanding to something public. I stood up, stepped back from the bed just enough to give space, but not enough to remove myself. The door opened. My father walked in first. Same posture, same controlled expression, like he was walking into a meeting, not a hospice room. My mother followed closely behind him, her face softer, but her eyes already scanning the room, landing on me almost immediately. Olivia came last, slower, more cautious. For a second, no one spoke. The air changed. Not louder, not tense in an obvious way, just different. My father cleared his throat. Mother, he said, stepping closer to the bed. His tone was respectful, careful, but underneath it, I could hear it. Control. Always control. You asked to see us. My grandmother did not respond right away. She let the silence sit for a moment, longer than was comfortable. Then she turned her head slightly, her gaze settling on him. I did, she said simply. My mother stepped forward next. We came as soon as we could, she added, her voice gentle, almost rehearsed. My grandmother's eyes shifted to her, then to Olivia, then finally back to my father. Good, she said. That was it. No gratitude, no warmth, just acknowledgement. My father glanced at me briefly, then back at her. Is everything all right? He asked. I almost smiled at that, not because it was funny, but because it was so predictable. The performance, the careful framing, like this was a normal visit, like nothing had happened the night before. My grandmother watched him for a long moment. Then she said, That depends. The room went quiet again. My father's expression tightened, just slightly. Depends on what? He asked. She did not answer him directly. Instead, she turned her head toward me. Emily, she said softly. I stepped closer. Yes, Grandma. She gestured lightly toward the envelope on the bed. Give it to him. I reached down, picked it up, and turned toward my father. He hesitated for just a fraction of a second before taking it. His fingers brushed mine briefly, and I could feel it. That shift. That awareness that something about this was not routine, not controlled. He opened the envelope, pulled out the document, and began to read. At first, his expression did not change. Neutral. Focused. The same look he used when reviewing contracts, reports, anything that required attention but not emotion. Then, slowly, that changed. His eyes moved faster. His jaw tightened. His posture shifted, just slightly, like something inside him had just recalculated. My mother leaned closer, trying to see. What is it? She asked quietly. He did not answer her. Not immediately. Olivia stepped forward too, her expression uncertain now, her earlier confidence gone. Dad? She said. He still did not respond. He kept reading. And in that silence, I realized something important. This was the first time, in a very long time, that he did not have control of the room. Finally, he lowered the paper slightly and looked up at my grandmother. What is this? He asked. His voice was still controlled, but underneath it, there was something new. Not anger. Not yet. Something closer to concern. My grandmother held his gaze without hesitation. That, she said calmly, is the truth. And for the first time since I had walked into that house the night before, I saw it. Not clearly, not fully, but enough. The beginning of the moment where everything they thought they owned was about to be taken away. My father stared at the document for a few seconds longer than necessary, like if he just held it there long enough, it might change into something else, something easier to control. Then he exhaled slowly and straightened his posture, the way he always did when he was about to take control of a situation. This does not make sense, he said, his tone measured, almost dismissive. There must be some mistake. My grandmother did not react. She did not argue. She did not even blink. She just watched him, calm and unmoving, like she had already heard every version of that sentence before. There is no mistake, she said quietly. My mother stepped closer, her hand lightly touching my father's arm as she tried to read over his shoulder. Richard, what is it saying? She asked, her voice softer now, uncertainty slipping in. He hesitated, just for a fraction of a second, then handed her the paper. It is a trust structure, he said. More complex than necessary. More complex than necessary. I almost smiled at that, because what he meant was more complex than he had expected. My mother scanned the document quickly, her eyes moving faster than his had. Then she slowed. Then she stopped. I saw it happen in real time. The moment understanding caught up to her. This says... She started, then paused, her voice tightening slightly. This says the funds were never under our authority. Silence, heavy this time, not polite, not controlled, real. Olivia shifted beside them, her confidence from the night before completely gone now. What does that mean? She asked, her voice quieter than I had ever heard it. My father did not answer immediately. He took the document back from my mother, flipped through the pages again, faster this time, like he was searching for something he had missed. A loophole, a justification, a way to reinterpret what was clearly written, but it was all there. Every line, every clause, every boundary he had crossed. It means, my grandmother said, her voice still calm, that you used something that was never yours to use. My father looked up at her then, really looked at her, and for the first time, I saw it. Not anger, not authority, something else, something closer to calculation breaking down. We are family, he said. These decisions are internal. My grandmother's expression did not change. No, she said, they are not. The room felt smaller somehow, like the walls had moved in just enough to make everything sharper. My mother stepped forward again, her tone shifting, trying to regain some kind of control over the narrative. We did what we thought was best, she said. Olivia needed support. Emily has always been independent. There it was again. The same justification. The same pattern. Just delivered in a quieter voice. My grandmother turned her head slightly toward her. And that gave you the right? She asked. Not loud, not aggressive, just direct. My mother did not answer. Olivia spoke instead. It is not like I knew all the details, she said quickly. They told me it was family money. I looked at her then, really looked at her, because that part was true. She had not questioned it, she had accepted it, because that was how things had always worked. She received. I adapted. My grandmother nodded slowly. Of course you did, she said, because that is what you were taught. That landed differently, not like an accusation, more like a conclusion. My father stepped forward again, his voice firmer now, trying to regain ground. Even if the structure is as you say, he began, this can be resolved privately. There it was, the pivot. Control through containment. Keep it quiet. Keep it inside the family. Fix it without consequences. My grandmother's eyes sharpened just slightly. No, she said again, just one word. But this time, it carried weight. Real weight. My father's jaw tightened. There is no need to escalate this, he continued. We can adjust the accounts, correct any imbalance and move forward. Adjust the accounts, correct the imbalance. Like this was a spreadsheet error. Like this was something that could be smoothed over with numbers. I felt something settle inside me at that moment. Not anger, not satisfaction, just clarity. Because I had heard this before. Not in these exact words, but in this exact tone. The tone of someone who believed everything could be managed, as long as they stayed in control of it. My grandmother leaned back slightly against her pillows, her expression unchanged. You are still trying to manage this, she said. My father did not respond. He did not need to. It was obvious. She continued, her voice steady. That is the problem. Another silence. Longer this time. No one moved. No one spoke. The air felt heavier. Then she turned her head slightly toward the door, not dramatically, just enough, and said, he should be here soon. My father followed her gaze instinctively. Who? He asked. She did not look back at him. The one person in this room who does not answer to you, she said. That sentence hung there, quiet, unavoidable. Olivia's eyes widened slightly. My mother's posture stiffened. And my father, for the first time since I had walked into that room, did not have an immediate response. We all heard it at the same time. Footsteps in the hallway, slow, measured, approaching. My heartbeat did not spike. It did not race. It stayed steady. Because whatever was about to walk through that door was not here for conversation. It was here for consequence. And I did not know exactly what would happen next, but I knew one thing for certain. This was no longer a family discussion. This was something else entirely. The footsteps stopped just outside the door, and for a brief second, no one in the room moved. It was the kind of silence that did not feel empty. It felt loaded, like something was about to shift, and everyone could sense it, even if they did not want to admit it. Then there was a soft knock, not hesitant, not aggressive, just deliberate. My grandmother did not raise her voice. She did not need to. Come in, she said. The door opened slowly, and a man stepped inside. Late 60s, maybe early 70s, dressed in a dark gray suit that looked tailored but understated, the kind of presence that did not need to announce itself to be taken seriously. He carried a leather briefcase in one hand, worn just enough to suggest years of use, not decoration. His eyes moved through the room once, taking in everything, everyone, in a single pass before settling on my grandmother. "Eleanor," he said, his tone respectful but familiar. "You asked for me." My grandmother nodded slightly. "I did, Thomas." Thomas, the name landed quietly, but I saw the reaction immediately. My father's posture shifted, just slightly, like recognition had just clicked into place. My mother's hand tightened at her side. Olivia looked between them, confused, trying to understand what she was missing, because this man was not a stranger to them. He stepped further into the room, closing the door behind him with a soft click, and set his briefcase down on the small table near the window. "I came as quickly as I could," he said. "I understand there has been a development." My grandmother's eyes flicked toward my father. "You could call it that," she said. Thomas turned then, his attention moving to my father, then to my mother, then briefly to Olivia, before finally resting on me for just a moment. Not long, just enough to acknowledge. Then he looked back at my grandmother. "Would you like me to proceed?" he asked. She did not hesitate. "Yes," she said. That was all it took. He opened his briefcase, pulled out a set of documents, thicker than the one I had been holding. More detailed, more complete. He placed them carefully on the table, aligning the edges with precision before turning back to face the room. "Mr. Carter," he said, addressing my father directly now, "I believe you have already seen a portion of the trust documentation." My father did not respond immediately. His eyes were fixed on the papers in Thomas's hand, his expression controlled, but no longer certain. "I have seen enough to know there are inconsistencies," he said finally. Thomas gave a small nod, like he had expected that answer. "There are no inconsistencies," he replied calmly, "only conditions that have been violated." That word, violated, landed differently. He continued before anyone could interrupt. "The trust established by Miss Eleanor Carter was structured with specific protections in place. Those protections were designed to prevent exactly what has occurred." My mother stepped forward, her voice tighter now. "We did not intend to violate anything," she said. "We made a family decision." Thomas turned his head slightly toward her. "Intent does not alter structure," he said, "and structure is what governs access." Olivia shifted again, her voice quieter, uncertain. "Can someone just explain what this actually means?" she asked. Thomas looked at her briefly, then back at my father. "It means," he said, "that the funds allocated under this trust were never accessible to you without authorization from the designated executor." My father's jaw tightened. "And who is that?" he asked, even though I could tell. He already knew the answer mattered. Thomas did not rush. He reached down, turned one of the pages, and tapped a specific line with his finger. "That would be me," he said. Silence. Not the kind from before. This one was heavier, final. My father's eyes dropped to the page, scanning quickly, then slower, then stopping completely. My mother leaned in again, reading over his shoulder, her breath catching just slightly as she processed it. Olivia did not move. She just stood there, her earlier confidence completely gone now, replaced with something else, something closer to realization. My father looked up again, his voice sharper now. "Even if that is the case," he said, "this is still an internal matter. We can resolve this without outside interference." Thomas did not react to the shift in tone. He simply closed the folder in front of him and rested his hand lightly on top of it. "I am not outside interference," he said. "I am the mechanism through which this trust exists." That distinction mattered, and everyone in the room felt it. My grandmother watched all of this without interruption, her expression unchanged, like she had already seen this exact moment play out in her mind long before it happened. My father took a step forward, his voice lower now, more controlled. "What exactly are you implying?" he asked. Thomas met his gaze directly. "I am not implying anything," he said. "I am stating clearly that the use of those funds without authorization constitutes a breach of fiduciary structure." The words were precise, measured, unavoidable. My mother's hand moved to her chest, her composure starting to slip. "That sounds extreme," she said. "This is still family." Thomas gave a small, almost sympathetic nod. "Family does not override legal boundaries," he replied. Olivia finally spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "So, what happens now?" she asked. That question hung there, not directed at anyone specific, but everyone knew who would answer it. Thomas turned his attention back to my grandmother. "That depends on how you wish to proceed," he said. My grandmother looked at him, then at my father, then at me, and for a moment no one spoke. Then she said calmly, clearly, without hesitation, "We proceed exactly as planned." And in that moment, I understood. This was never about reacting to what they had done. This was about what she had already decided would happen if they did it, and whatever came next was not going to be something they could talk their way out of. No one spoke for a few seconds after that, not because they did not have anything to say, but because for the first time, they were not sure which version of the truth would work anymore. My father was the first to recover. He straightened slightly, adjusted his jacket, and stepped closer to Thomas, like proximity alone might reestablish control. "Let us be very clear," he said, his tone measured but firm. "No one here acted with malicious intent. This was a family decision made in good faith." Thomas did not interrupt him. He let him finish, then nodded once, like he was acknowledging the statement without accepting it. "Intent has already been addressed," he said calmly. "What matters now is outcome." My father's jaw tightened again. "And what outcome are you suggesting?" Thomas did not answer immediately. Instead, he opened the folder again, flipped to another section, and turned it slightly so it faced the room. "The trust includes a contingency clause," he said, "specifically designed for unauthorized access or misuse of allocated funds." I felt my breath slow, not speed up, because whatever was coming next was something my grandmother had already accounted for. My mother leaned in again, her voice quieter now, more cautious. "What kind of contingency?" she asked. Thomas glanced at her briefly, then back to the document. "In the event of a breach," he read, "control of all remaining trust assets is immediately restructured under direct oversight of the executor, with full discretionary authority granted to the primary beneficiary." The words landed one by one, slow, precise, unavoidable. Olivia frowned slightly. "What does that mean in plain English?" she asked. Thomas closed the folder gently. "It means," he said, "that as of this moment, your parents no longer have any influence, access, or authority over any portion of this trust." Silence again. But this time, it was different. My father did not speak right away. He stood there, still, processing, recalculating, searching for something to hold on to. "That is not reasonable," he said finally. "We have managed these matters for years." Thomas nodded slightly. "That is correct," he said, "and that management has now been formally terminated." My mother took a small step back, like the ground had just shifted under her feet. "You cannot just remove us like that," she said. "This is our family." Thomas looked at her, not unkindly, but without hesitation. "It is not your authority," he said. Olivia's eyes moved quickly between them, her voice softer now, uncertain in a way I had never heard before. "So, what happens to the money?" she asked. Thomas turned his attention slightly toward me. "Not fully, just enough. Control transfers to the designated beneficiary," he said. And for the first time, every pair of eyes in the room shifted in the same direction. Toward me. I did not move. I did not react. I just stood there, exactly as my grandmother had told me to. Calm, quiet. Let them speak first. My father followed their gaze, then looked back at Thomas. "You are saying she now controls everything?" he asked. Thomas nodded once. With immediate effect, he said, "That was the moment everything changed. Not loudly, not dramatically, but completely." My mother's expression shifted from confusion to something else, something sharper. "Emily," she said, turning toward me now, her voice suddenly softer, almost careful. "We can talk about this. There is no need to let things escalate." There it was, the pivot again. Not control through authority this time, control through connection, through tone, through the idea that this could still be handled quietly if I just cooperated. I did not answer. Not yet. My father stepped in next, his voice more controlled than before, but tighter underneath. "This does not need to become something larger than it is," he said. "We can correct the allocation, replace what was used, move forward as a family, replace what was used, like it was a temporary inconvenience, like it had not been a decision made in front of 30 people, with laughter, with certainty." Olivia looked at me then, really looked at me, her voice quieter than either of them. "I did not know," she said. "If I had known, I would have said something." I believed her, at least partially, but belief did not change anything. My grandmother watched all of this without speaking, her eyes steady, her expression unchanged. Because she already knew how this part would go. I could feel it. The shift in the room, the recalibration, the way everything was now being directed toward me, not as the person who had been wronged, but as the person who now held something they needed. And that was when I realized something else. This was the first time in my life that I was not the one adapting. I was not the one adjusting. I was not the one being asked to understand. They were, and they did not know how to do it. I took a slow breath, steady, controlled, and looked at my father, then my mother, then Olivia, one by one. "You already made your decision," I said. My voice did not shake. It did not rise. It just existed. My father frowned slightly. "Emily, this is not about—" I cut him off, not by raising my voice, but by continuing. "You made it publicly," I said. "You explained it clearly. You said I did not need it." Silence. No one interrupted this time, because now they were listening, and I was not finished. "So I am not sure why this is suddenly a discussion," I added. My mother's lips parted slightly, like she was about to respond, then closed again. Olivia looked down. My father held my gaze, his expression unreadable now, and somewhere behind all of that, I could feel it. The shift. The one they could not control. The one my grandmother had already set in motion. This was not about fixing what they had done. This was about what came next. And for the first time, they were not the ones deciding it. I could feel it in the room the moment my words settled. Not the kind of silence that comes from confusion, but the kind that comes when something undeniable has just been said out loud. My father did not interrupt me this time. He just stood there, looking at me in a way I had never seen before. Not dismissive, not authoritative. Something else, something closer to recalculating. My mother was the first to try again. "Emily," she said softly, taking a small step toward me, her voice careful, measured, almost fragile now. "We did not mean to make you feel excluded." I almost smiled at that, not because it was funny, but because of how small it sounded compared to what had actually happened. "You did not make me feel excluded," I said. "You made a decision." My voice stayed even. No anger, no emphasis, just clarity. She hesitated, her expression tightening slightly, like she was searching for a different way to approach it. "We thought it was practical," she added. "You have stability. Olivia needed help." There it was again, the same logic, repackaged, repeated, like if they said it enough times it would become something reasonable. I nodded once. "I understand exactly what you thought," I said. And I did. That was the problem. I understood it too well. My father stepped forward then, his tone more direct now, less softened than my mother's. "This situation has escalated unnecessarily," he said. "There is no benefit in turning this into something adversarial." Adversarial, another carefully chosen word, designed to reframe what had happened into something mutual, something shared. I held his gaze. "It was not adversarial when you made the decision," I said. He did not respond immediately, because there was nothing to respond with that would not confirm it. Olivia shifted again, her hands tightening slightly around the glass she was still holding, though she had not taken a sip since she walked into the room. "We can fix this," she said quietly. "If it is about the money, we can fix it." I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time, I saw it clearly. Not just what she had done, but how she understood it. To her, this was still about numbers, about replacement, about balance. "It was never about fixing it," I said. She frowned slightly. "Then what is it about?" she asked. I paused for a second, not because I did not know the answer, but because I wanted to say it in a way that could not be misunderstood. "It is about the fact that you all decided I did not matter in that decision," I said. No one spoke. Not my father, not my mother, not Olivia. Because that was the part they could not reframe. That was the part they could not explain away with practicality or logic or timing. That was the part that had always been there. And now, it was visible. Thomas stood quietly near the window, watching the exchange without interruption, his presence steady, neutral, but unmistakably significant. My grandmother remained still in her bed, her eyes moving between us, not intervening, not guiding, just observing. Because this part, This part was mine. My father exhaled slowly, his shoulders lowering just slightly, like he was shifting strategies again. If this is about acknowledgement, he said, then I am acknowledging it now. We should have handled it differently. It was the closest thing to an apology I had ever heard from him, but it was still framed, still controlled, still positioned as something procedural rather than personal. I nodded once. You should have, I said. My mother's voice came next, softer, more emotional now. We never intended to hurt you, she said. That word again. Intended. Always intention, never impact. I did not argue with her. I did not correct her. I just let it sit there. Because arguing would mean engaging in the same pattern again. And I was done with that. Olivia took a small step forward, her voice barely above a whisper now. What do you want to happen? She asked. That question hung there, different from the others. Not defensive, not strategic, just uncertain. I looked at her, then at my parents, then back at her. I am not sure yet, I said. And that was the truth. Not because I lacked direction, but because, for the first time, I was not being forced to decide in reaction to them. I had space, time, control. My father nodded slowly, like he was accepting that answer, but I could see it in his eyes. He did not like it. He did not like not knowing what came next. He did not like not being able to predict the outcome. Thomas stepped forward slightly then, his voice calm but firm. In the meantime, he said, there are immediate actions that must be taken. My father's attention shifted to him instantly. Such as, he asked. Thomas opened the folder again, flipping to another page. The funds that were used will need to be accounted for in full, he said, and any assets acquired through those funds will be subject to review. My mother's breath caught slightly. Review? She repeated. Thomas nodded. Yes, he said, including the vehicle. That landed differently, not abstract, not theoretical, real, immediate. Olivia's eyes widened slightly, her grip tightening. Wait, she said. You are saying the car... Thomas did not interrupt her. He simply held her gaze. And in that silence, she understood. My father's expression hardened again, not in control this time, but in resistance. That is not necessary, he said. Thomas closed the folder slowly. It is already in motion, he replied. And just like that, the conversation shifted again. Not about feelings, not about explanations, about consequences. Real ones, immediate ones. And for the first time, they were the ones trying to catch up. Olivia's hand slowly lowered from where she had been holding the glass, like the weight of what Thomas just said had finally reached her. You cannot be serious, she said, her voice thin now, stripped of everything it had carried the night before. Thomas did not raise his voice. He did not need to. I am always serious when it comes to legal structure, he replied. My father stepped forward again, faster this time, his control slipping just enough to be noticeable. This is disproportionate, he said. You are turning a manageable situation into something unnecessarily punitive. Thomas looked at him without any reaction. I am enforcing what was already established, he said. Nothing more. That distinction mattered, and my father knew it. Because for the first time, he was not negotiating terms. He was reacting to something that had already been decided without him. My mother turned toward me again, her voice softer, more urgent now. Emily, please, she said. You do not have to let this happen. I held her gaze, calm, still. I am not making it happen, I said. It already did. She shook her head slightly, like she was trying to reject that reality. But you can stop it, she insisted. You can tell him to step back. I did not answer right away, not because I was unsure, but because I wanted her to understand the difference. I could, I said finally. But why would I? That question landed harder than anything I had said before, because there was no accusation in it, no anger, just truth. My father's expression shifted again, something sharper now, something closer to frustration breaking through. Because this is your family, he said, because this affects all of us. I nodded once. It did yesterday too, I said. Silence. That one sentence closed the space they had been trying to reopen. Olivia looked between us, her voice unsteady now. I can give it back, she said quickly. The car, the money, whatever it takes. I did not know. I will fix it. I believed her. Again, partially. But belief did not undo anything. Thomas stepped in then, his tone unchanged. The matter is no longer about voluntary correction, he said. It is about formal resolution. Olivia's shoulders dropped slightly, like that last piece of hope had just been removed. My mother pressed her lips together, her composure starting to fracture in small, visible ways. This is going too far, she said. We are being treated like strangers. Thomas gave a small nod. You are being treated according to the structure that was put in place, he said. My grandmother finally shifted slightly in her bed, her voice calm but firm as it entered the space again. You are being treated exactly the way you chose to treat her, she said. No one responded to that, because there was nothing to respond with. It was not an argument, it was a mirror. My father looked at her, really looked at her, and for a second, I saw something I had never seen before. Not authority, not control, something closer to realization. But it passed quickly. This does not have to end like this, he said. My grandmother's eyes held his. It already did, she replied. The room went still again. Not tense, not chaotic, just settled, like something had reached its natural conclusion whether anyone was ready for it or not. Thomas glanced down at his watch briefly, then back up. There are a few immediate steps that will be initiated today, he said. Account access has already been frozen pending review. Asset tracing will begin this afternoon, and a formal notice will be issued regarding the misallocation. Each sentence landed like a checkpoint. Clear, structured, final. My father did not interrupt this time. He just listened, because now there was nothing left to negotiate. My mother turned toward him, her voice low, almost shaken. Richard, she started, but did not finish. Olivia stood still, her eyes fixed on the floor now, the reality settling in piece by piece, and I just stood there, exactly where I had been, not moving, not reacting, because this part was not about me anymore. It was about the consequences of what they had chosen. My grandmother's hand moved slightly, resting back against the blanket, her energy still present, still steady despite everything. She looked at me one more time, and there was something in her expression. Not satisfaction, not triumph, just certainty, like she had done exactly what she needed to do. And for the first time since this all began, I felt it too. Not relief, not victory, just balance. The kind that does not come from taking something back, but from finally no longer having it taken from you. My father exhaled slowly, his shoulders lowering just slightly, the fight in him not gone, but changed. We will comply, he said finally. The words were controlled, measured, but different from before, because now they were not a strategy. They were acceptance. My mother closed her eyes briefly, like she was trying to hold on to something that was already gone. Olivia did not move. Thomas nodded once, acknowledging the statement without adding anything to it, and just like that, it was done. Not everything, not the full outcome, but the part that mattered, the shift, the moment where control changed hands. And there was no going back. The weeks that followed were quieter than I expected. Not empty, not cold, just different. The kind of quiet that comes after something finally settles into place. The accounts were corrected. The car was returned without a scene. Conversations became shorter, more careful, more honest in ways they had never been before. I did not go back to the way things were, and neither did they. But for the first time in my life, I was not trying to earn my place in that family. I was simply choosing where I stood. My grandmother passed 3 weeks later, peacefully, exactly the way she had lived, in control of her own story until the very end. At her service, there were no grand speeches about legacy or perfection, just a quiet understanding of who she had been and what she had protected. I think about her often now, especially in moments when I start to question myself, when that old instinct to stay quiet tries to come back. And I remember what she showed me, not with words, but with action, that love without boundaries is not love, it is permission, and that sometimes the most important thing you can do is decide where you end and someone else begins. If you are listening to this and something in it feels familiar, if you have ever been the one who adjusted, the one who stayed quiet, the one who was told you did not need what was taken from you, I want you to hear this clearly. Your strength is not a reason for people to take more from you. Your independence is not an invitation to be overlooked. And your worth does not shrink just because someone else refuses to see it. Trust that voice inside you when something feels off. Protect your boundaries, not just emotionally, but financially, practically, in ways that honor your future. You do not have to fight loudly to reclaim yourself. Sometimes, it is enough to stand still and say, "This is where it changes." I believe there is something greater that guides us in those moments, whether you call it intuition, faith, or something God placed inside you to recognize truth when it appears. And when you listen to it, even when it is uncomfortable, it will lead you back to yourself. Thank you for staying with me through this, truly. Stories like this are not easy to tell, and they are not always easy to hear. But if even one part of it made you feel less alone, then it mattered. If you want to share where you are listening from or what this story meant to you, I would love to read it. And if you feel called to, you can subscribe to hear more stories like this, ones that remind us we are not as alone as we sometimes think. My name is Emily Carter. I am 32 years old, and the lesson I want to leave you with is this: never let anyone decide your value just because you learned how to survive without them.